Hello, welcome. My name is Elton Casey, and I've written a book, a novel, my second novel, entitled Most Valuable Human, The Commercial of John Henry. Perhaps you just watched Luke Cage. The topic of my book is about the legendary folk hero, John Henry, and how, in fact, Luke Cage, Superman, Captain America, Wonder Man, Captain Marvel, even Shazam and possibly Thor have all been crafted from the miraculous, marvelous, immaculate first folk hero known to American folklore, John Henry. Let's get back to Luke Cage. Luke Cage is an individual who was framed for a crime he didn't commit. He was set up by a friend of his named Willis Stryker. He was imprisoned, tossed asunder by those inmates and guards and corrections officers, and experimented upon like a lab rat, and was given superhuman, super tough skin. He's indestructible, and he has super strength. So does John Henry. But Luke Cage, as we know from watching it, he lives in Harlem. He has super strength and indestructible skin. He was experimented on by Dr. Bernstein in the Seagate prison when he moved to Georgia. He was locked up because his friend Willis Stryker framed him for having heroin that he did not possess. Luke Cage works for, at some point, and is a rival with a crime mob boss under the Maggia family called Sonny Caputo. Sonny Caputo goes by the name Hammer. Hence we have an alliteration to the instrument of choice that John Henry wielded. John Henry, in laying railroad tracks across America, between the east and the west, in the south, used a 20-pound hammer. It was a railroad driving steel hammer. Okay, so Luke Cage's one of his primary villains, foes, is called Hammer. Even Silvio Silvermane of the Silvermane crime boss family was turned into a cyborg. Now, what do we know about cyborgs? John Henry's legend, again, the steel driving man is what they called John Henry. Hence, the Man of Steel. We'll get into that later. Superman himself was crafted originally from this first superhero who was named after the steel that he drove to compress into railroads that fitted this country for its biggest endowment and enrichment period. Hammerhead of the Hammerhead family, again, is an alliteration to the story of John Henry because his story involves the wielding of a hammer, a 20-pound railroad driving hammer. There is a crime boss in the Hammerhead family named Big Rock. Big Rock took over for Hammerhead in the Hammerhead crime family, which again is under the Maggia or Mafia crime boss underworld, where Luke Cage encounters many of his foes. Then we get into Luke Cage's friend, Willis Stryker. Willis Stryker went by the name Diamondback. Why is Diamondback significant? Well, in the 1870s, I should say 1860s, when John Henry was working in the Lewis Tunnel, which is a tunnel where he excavated and burrowed through this rock through the West Virginia mountains, as they came to be called, they often used diamond-tipped steam engines to supplant manual labor. But when you use terms like Diamondback, Big Rock, Hammerhead, Hammer, you're all referencing the story of John Henry. The mere fact that his best friend's name is Diamondback is a direct reference to the diamond drill that was used in competition with John Henry. Again, there are segments of his story that are scrambled and cryptically interloped into the story of Luke Cage and many others. Willis Stryker also came to be known, again, as Diamond Head, but in the experimentation of John Henry, Mr. Bernstein, the scientist who experimented on him in the Seagate prison in Georgia, got this technology, got this advanced acumen for the science by experimenting on a man that came to be known as Warhawk. One of the main attributes of Warhawk was that he had what was called omnium-like steel skin. In the Marvel metallurgy and the super metals in the Marvel stories, the comics. There's adamantium, and there's omnium. Omnium is second only to adamantium. It is a steel alloy. So we know that Luke Cage was experimented on similarly by Mr. Bernstein and was given the same type of steel alloy omnium skin as Warhawk. So again, we have further comparisons to the John Henry story. They pair the ex-slave John Henry, which is reincarnated as Luke Cage, with Iron Fist, who's supposed to be a representation of the Chinese railroad workers, because he is a representation of iron. Luke Cage is a representation of steel because he has omnium steel alloy skin. Now, there's a man by the name of John Bushmaster, and they're doused with these chemicals. Luke Cage and John Bushmaster, they're electrocuted by a down power line, and adversely, John Bushmaster is turned into unliving metal. So once again, we have the alliteration, the illusion, the analogy of man becoming metal, or man becoming steel, man becoming iron. We have man becoming hammer, man becoming hammerhead, man becoming big rock, man becoming diamond, as in the diamond tip drill. Now we have man, we've also had man turn into cyborg, which is a representation of John Henry's story. His feats and accomplishments over metal lent itself to the evolution of man being fused with metal, hence cyborg. But now we have a man who's not a cyborg. John Bushmaster becomes unliving metal in and of itself. He also dated the She-Hulk while he was in Heroes for Hire. Why is this significant? And why is Luke Cage's relationship with She-Hulk an alliteration or an analogy to the fact that he comes from John Henry? Because John Henry's wife in the story, in the ancient folk legend and historical story of John Henry, is one that he has a girlfriend by the name of Polly Ann. As folklore would have it, after John Henry died with his hammer in his hand, Polly Ann would pick up the 20-pound hammer and continue to hammer into bedrock herself, becoming the first female superhuman. She-Hulk is a reincarnation of Polly Ann, a black woman who lived in the 1860s, who has superhuman strength and hammered rock. So again, they've paired Luke Cage and She-Hulk together. We have all these allusions and metaphors and analogies of Hammerhead, the Hammer, which is Sonny Caputo. Silvio Silverman got turned into a cyborg. John Bushmaster got turned into living metal in his feud with Luke Cage. They put Luke Cage and the living metal in a tank, and his spirit was exorcised and exhumed and remanifested. We have Big Rock, we have Hammerhead, we have Iron Fist, who's a representation of the Chinese who laid railroad track. Luke Cage is a representation of John Henry, who laid railroad track in the South. They're pairing together. It's a complete metaphor and allusion to the John Henry story.